automation and orchestration, endpoint detection and response, network visibility, cloud, containers, DevSecOps, threat intelligence, security platforms. Wondering how to keep up with all the latest security products and trends while still keeping your organization safe? Then stick around to listen to Ready, Set, Secure, the SET Solutions Podcast.
And hello, everybody. Welcome to Ready, Set, Secure, SET Solutions live stream and podcast. This is episode 36. As usual, my name is Michael Farnham, CTO with SET Solutions. Thank you for being here. And also, as usual, Mr. Justin Hutchins, a.k.a. Hutch. How you doing, Hutch?
Doing good. Good to be here.
Thank you for being here. And we have a special guest, old buddy of mine. I have not sat down with Zach in a while. Did get to see him at HouSecCon a couple of weeks ago, so that was good. How you doing, Zach?
Good. How are you guys?
Good, man. Good. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us kind of about what your company's doing, what you're doing these days, and then we'll get into the rest of the live stream.
Sure. So I've been around security now for actually longer than I'd like to admit, dealing with IRC originally starting out, kind of gone through a lot of different role titles from, red team testing, threat intelligence, pen testing. And now I'm co-founded a company named Reliant Security Solutions, and we specialize in ransomware negotiations and payments for companies.
That's kind of a big deal these days. So.
It is.
Awesome. Well, welcome. We're going to have some good discussions to talk with you about. That's why we invited you on. We always like to bring in folks that are doing some really cool stuff out there. So thanks for being on. But okay, so normally everybody, we do a news segment. We're kind of going to do that. But first I'm going to do our regular SET Solutions segment, and then we'll get into that. We've got one news article we're going to talk about, something, unless you've been living under a rock, if you're in cybersecurity, about it's been causing quite a bit of brouhaha. So real quick, before we get started with that, though, on the SET Solutions news segment, the API conference, American Petroleum Institute, I believe it is, their cybersecurity conference that they put on every year is coming up November 9th and 10th. We're going to have some happy hours there. We're going to be representing there. If you're in the oil and gas energy space and you are attending that conference in Houston on November 9th and 10th, please let us know. We've got some events going on. Be exciting times. It's always a good conference, and I think it's the first one that's been live since all the lockdown stuff. So it's good to have them back. They went virtual last year like a lot of people did. We've got a GRC blog coming out by a friend of the company, Doug Landau. If you know anybody in the GRC world, you probably know Doug Landau. Doug wrote a blog post for us, so be on the lookout for that. You see the link there below. And we've also got Jimmy Mejia, who is continuing his blog series, and he's doing external pen testing this time. And then in January, we are planning some training days with a couple of our vendors, CrowdStrike and CyberArk. So be on the lookout for that. It's actually, talk to your account managers. If you just want to get some actual hands-on keyboard and play with some of that, it's going to be a non-sales type event. It's going to be just for about 30 or 35 people. In each session, we're going to do half-day training. You're going to get breakfast or you'll get lunch, depending on which session you're in. And you'll actually get hands-on keyboard. Their SEs are putting together some pretty cool training. That's in January, so get on the docket for that now. It ought to be a lot of fun. And then CTF update. So we've been doing a CTF for October, Cybersecurity Awareness Month. That's been going on. So kind of what are the latest updates?
A lot of people are getting really involved. We've got over 150 participants right now. Each week we do a new set of challenges, some really cool prizes that we're dishing out for those that win first, second, and third for each week. So we are in the final week, but there's still time to get involved in those challenges. So if you enjoy fun technical challenges and have some free time, definitely join the link in the bottom.
Yep, it's a lot of fun. A lot of people participating this year. Lauren, if you can you jump on and talk about who our sponsors are for that event?
Hello. Yes. So week one was sponsored by iBoss. They are a newer partner that we are working with. Week two was a crowd favorite, CrowdStrike. They sponsored last week. This week, we are working with CyberArk. So like you mentioned, CyberArk and CrowdStrike are two of the vendors that we're going to be doing those customer training days with. And then coming up this week for our last week of events is Cloudflare. So thank you to all the sponsors that joined us.
Thank you, Lauren, for saying that. Yes, thank you to all the sponsors too, because it really means a lot and gives some people some fun out there, and you get some cool prizes. So keep playing. We only got another week to go.
This is the final week.
This is the final week. All right. Okay, so that's it for the news segment. Thank you for Lauren for popping up on the screen magically and telling us about that. I love modern technology. So before we get into Zach's area of expertise, even though this is probably an area of expertise because Zach's got a lot of areas of expertise, we're going to talk about the issue around the Missouri quote unquote hacking case where somebody found some stuff in HTML. It was serious hack, a completely serious hack. But really it's caused a big uproar in the community. So once you just give everybody the lay of the land if they don't know about it, and then we'll go from there, kind of discuss.
Certainly. A journalist had discovered while accessing a education website that was specific to the state of Missouri, discovered that the social security numbers for teachers within that state were disclosed. They weren't encrypted in any way. They weren't kept on the back end. They were literally in the HTML source code of this website. So that, as you mentioned, any elite hacker that just right clicks and clicks view source or presses F12 on their keyboard can then view that source code and have access to the social security numbers of those teachers. So this journalist did all the right things. He privately disclosed it to the state and to the owners of that website, worked with them through the remediation process. And then once they had already resolved the issue, he did what many of us in the industry tend to do, and that is to just raise awareness, create a blog post or publish the details of the finding. And unfortunately, that last step of publishing the details of the finding apparently rubbed the Missouri governor the wrong way, who has since claimed that, and if you listen to his speech on this, he essentially makes it sound like this was threat actors that were determined to take down the entire state. The hyperbolic language is just absurd, and he even indicates within his speech that the researcher accessed up to 3 records of social security numbers, which to me sounds like a very restrained proof of concept, since all evidence suggests that there was well over 10,000 social security numbers that were accessible, but nonetheless has claimed that he is going to use all means within his power to prosecute this individual that privately disclosed and assisted them with the remediation of this finding. Unfortunately, this sets a terrible trend, a terrible precedent for anybody that's doing security research, to where you're going to push people back in the closet, where you're afraid to, or back in the basement where you're afraid to disclose any kind of security findings or any kind of major issues that you find, because you're afraid that you are going to be prosecuted. And that leaves those issues fully exposed for the people that are actually going to do bad things with them to be able to exploit and gain access to that data. So, and there's been multiple very reputable people that are well seasoned in the information security industry who have already tried to reach out and tactfully contact the mayor and let him know you are going the wrong direction. And unfortunately, he has continued to double down. He refuses to back down on his position on this. And I think we're headed down a really bad road with this. And I hope that somebody is able to get through to him and that he'll ultimately listen to reason. But
yeah, again, we always venture on that edge and that precipice of saying something political and stuff like that. And I don't want to get into parties or anything, but to me, this is a typical knee-jerk reaction of someone who thinks that he's got to be forceful and just push every boundary to make his constituency think that he's doing something right, that he's being proactive and trying to get these bad guys and, knock them down. And it's an absolute ridiculous assertion to think that this guy was a reporter, right? I mean, he wasn't,
it wasn't some dedicated security researcher.
He just was trying to let them know, hey, I found this stuff. And again, through nothing sophisticated.
Right.
This was literally, even some of the articles that I saw were wrong, because they were saying that anybody can do this through the developer view of, you don't even have to have a true developer view, a sophisticated browser to do this. You can simply go view source code, and that's it. Everybody knows in Chrome and in Firefox, you've got these complicated developer views that you can do a lot with, but it's still free information that's just sitting out there that anybody can get. So it's absolutely maddening to me. Zach, I'm sure you've got multiple things to say on that.
Yeah, so just a little clarification. The person I believe that wrote it, or at least that was being targeted, is a professor at associate professor at University of Missouri St. Louis, who teaches cybersecurity. So the person being targeted is somebody that actually knows what they're doing, and if you will, is educating younger people or educating people on how to properly do things. So I would, I'll use this little platform here to mention EFF has mentioned it. EFF potentially is getting involved. So if you have some extra money, I firmly believe Electronic Frontier Foundation is a great place to stand up for the legal rights of people that are doing the right thing. Because just like Hutch said, the concern that people will be prosecuted, or that there'll be some kind of legal blowback for responsible disclosure, keeps them from making those disclosures. And really all you're doing at that point is allowing the threat actors that would use this irresponsibly to work with, work pretty much unchecked.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so backwards. We always, every time we've made several steps forward, we have to take some steps back because of somebody who just wants to go out there and be a blowhard. I'm sorry. It's just, it's maddening. The only other thing that bothered me about the whole thing, and we don't have to get terribly deep into the discussion, but I did post something as one of the lawyer that was trying to defend the newspaper came out and made, I get why they made the statement, but it was erroneous by saying that hacking is a crime essentially. And that, okay, I get, you're a lawyer, you're trying to create whatever defense you've got to create. That was unfortunate language because, as Jason Street would say, hacking is not a crime, and it's not. This person wasn't even hacking in my, I guess at the pure sense of the word, they were doing that. That's a debate in and of itself, but that was unfortunate language. But overall, this is just a maddening issue, and hopefully EFF does get involved. I know they will be. And hopefully some other people will help them get this taken care of.
I may or may not have rage tweeted the governor of Missouri and let him know that he was quickly on the fast track for making Missouri the next Iowa. So for anybody that isn't aware of the story, a couple of years ago, a couple of security professionals that were doing a penetration test were doing a penetration test for the courthouse in Iowa, and the sheriff there had them arrested. And even once they had vetted them and verified that they were authorized and hired by the state in order to perform that penetration test, basically decided that he was going to send a message and prosecute them. And since then, my understanding is, and I've talked to a lot of different consulting firms that have pretty much indicated that nobody will do business directly with the state of Iowa anymore when it comes to penetration testing. And that's unfortunate because it means that they're going to be less secure for it. And I think that's going to, unfortunately, if he continues down this road, I think we're going to see the same thing with the state of Missouri.
Well, and as we saw here, it got way beyond kind of pushing pressure. I'm not sure how much viewers have looked into it, but the governor actually got a PAC involved to take his defense. They bought advertising space on Facebook. They pushed the message out to a lot of people, trying to make the governor look like he was doing the correct thing here. So this goes beyond kind of pushing the limitations of what he can do to actually kind of use it as a political podium to try to actually fundraise, I guess would be the best way to put it.
That's exactly what it comes down to, is you're trying to fundraise and be seen as this person trying to
What
law. And
what's unfortunate is that us in the technical community, we get it. We see why this is a problem, but there are so many people that just hear that word hacker and just are probably gonna eat it up as far as that propaganda. And
I've said it before. Zach, I think you probably were there that time at DerbyCon where that reporter on Facebook said there's a bunch of hackers down there at the Hyatt or wherever it was. We should go arrest them all. And we got on there and finally actually convinced him that it was a silly position to take. But anyway, guys, we could beat this one up all day long. We definitely want to give Zach some time to talk about what he's doing these days. But yeah, if you do want to support EFF and help with that, or just send a word out, I've gone out on Missouri's site, even though I'm not a constituent, and sent stuff out to the Missouri governor as well. I mean, just any little thing helps. So
that's probably the better approach to rage tweeting. The governor's taking the tactful.
I was very nice about it. I was just saying, please, educate yourself and all that good stuff. I have to be nice, Anyway, all right. So enough about that, even though there's not enough about that because we should talk about that more, but we've only got so much time and Lauren's going to cut us off after a while. So, Zach, ransomware. Negotiations, all of the fun that comes with ransomware. Everybody knows, I keep saying everybody knows. Again, that's a really big rock if you're in cybersecurity, you don't know about ransomware these days. But it's a huge thing hitting large companies, small companies, all across the board. What you've done is entered into the market, which I've heard more and more about recently, about doing negotiations around ransomware. Give us kind of a quick 2-minute, how are you approaching it? Are you talking directly to the bad actors? Are you working on behalf? Just, kind of a rundown, and maybe let's get into kind of some anecdotes. What are some of your quote unquote favorite moments of it?
Sure. Yeah. So like you said, ransomware is an issue. In case people are not aware, I guess the one silver lining I will say is pretty much since the Colonial Pipeline attack and that issue, or the amount being requested in a ransom has dropped dramatically. So that's kind of one of the interesting things to point out. So what we do is, you're exactly right. We kind of handle the negotiation and helping the company facilitate a payment if it gets down to it. It's not something you usually, we do get requests to come in and consult and talk to executives on how a playbook should run and what it looks like to make a payment and what companies can do to be set up for this situation. But really, for the most part, you really don't have to interact with us pre-incident very much. We are usually brought in by a breach coach. If somebody's not familiar with that, then congrats, you haven't had to deal with any kind of cyber insurance issue lately. But really what it comes down to is, previously you would have an incident. You might contact your incident response provider, and then usually you had a term for notifying your insurance provider that you would be making a claim. Sometimes that was 12 hours, 24 hours. Sometimes it was 30 days. It really just depended on your cyber insurance policy. Well, now, kind of looking back to some major events that happened, right now what you currently have is your cyber insurance policy usually wants to be notified immediately. In some cases, before you can even power off a server or machine, you have to notify your insurance provider. That insurance provider is then going to basically assign you a breach coach. And what the breach coach is a law firm for the most part. They are handling communications between your incident response provider, your crisis management provider, your public relations, and through me as well, your insurance company too. So really, the entire process goes through this breach coach, and it's all to maintain privilege. Basically protecting your organization in case they get sued, and in that discovery part of getting that lawsuit where they come to collect records, they basically then have to go through this law firm, which kind of filters out what can be requested and what can be handed over. So usually either that breach coach or that particular crisis response company is what brings us in to the mix if you have a ransom situation.
Okay. So who do you within the organization normally work with? Is that the CISO? Is that what's your norm? Is that risk department, or who is that?
Yeah, typically we interact directly with chief legal officer, CEO, CFO, and then on occasion CISO. Usually, by the time it comes to us, it's not necessarily a technical situation that you're involved in. Incident response will be providing things to us like IOCs, so we can help do sanctions checks, obviously. But for the most part, once a ransom, and this is kind of where people have to consider it in their playbooks and developing playbooks for an organization, is really the CISO and any kind of technical staff, while providing input, are not going to be making any kind of decision on paying a ransom. It really does come down to the board and the CEO usually on who is going to approve and who is going to, allow that ransom to be paid. So usually it depends, of course, on every circumstance, whether there's, a chance of loss of life, whether the entire company is literally taken down and not functioning, or it could be something as simple as, and what we see a lot lately is data exfiltration and then a ransom on that data, but day-to-day operations is still, being performed perfectly fine.
You got any? I mean, there's so much wrapped up in
what is the preferred medium of communication for ransomware actors? Are you looking at like WhatsApp and Signal and stuff like that, and talking with them over that? Or?
Yeah, so it really depends. Each group is a little bit different, and it really kind of, depends on how they're set up. A lot of them operate in the RAS space, the ransomware as a service space now, and a lot of those come with different modules for communications. So it depends. A lot of them have their own websites with their own chat, through Tor. But usually we most often see an advanced attacker using, something like QTalks or using a Talks method of chat for communication.
Interesting. And one thing that kind of fascinated me, just because I had really never considered it, but in talking with you previously about this, is you mentioned that you start getting into almost tangent conversations with these guys, and you really see an actual person on the other end as somebody that's, rather than just doing a job. So I guess I'd be interested to hear if you have any stories of kind of the most unusual conversations or unexpected conversations that you've had.
Yeah, so it is interesting, right? Because this person is uh, it's literally the standard typical infosec person for the most part, I would say. They are just, whether you want to say other side of the business plan or the other side of the moral compass, or, whatever you want to classify them at, they usually have a lot of similar life experiences. It's people that grew up with interest in information security or IT. Sometimes sometimes you're talking just to whatever service that they have hired, if you will, to perform the negotiation. But that's usually a lot of times has a technical background. Yeah, you depending on the length of the negotiation, how secure you feel about the communication, then you can get to know quite a bit about the threat actor, how they're operating, what platforms they're using. Honestly, depending on a long engagement, I can tell you what time they usually wake up. So it kind of gives me time zones, which it seems like should be easy. But then you start realizing, like, even if you think about InfoSec, there's a lot of us that get up and are morning people. There's a lot of people that like to sleep in and stay up really late. And so it's kind of like that. If you had a work from home agreement and it said you can do whatever you want as long as you achieve XYZ, then what time space would you rather work in? It's kind of similar, but I can tell you a lot of times what at time the threat actor would come online, usually when they would disappear for 15, 20, 30 minutes, probably getting coffee or dropping off kids at school, things like that. So you really get to know and sometimes have some very open conversations about, their practice, how they got into some place, which they usually won't give you until the very end after payment, but generally, how they prefer to operate, other threat actors that might have been in the environment, what data they're trying to sell or backdoors they're trying to sell at the time. And we partner with a lot of threat intelligence companies that do a lot of great deep dives into different threat actors. And so sometimes in the, you've read different things that they have going on. And so you'll just straight up ask them about it. Say, I saw this other breach over here. Did you, is that one of yours as well? Things like that. They're just kind of conversations that allow us to kind of get a little bit better perspective from how the threat actor is operating, and kind of also build out a little bit more of a portfolio on the threat actor.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to be. That question is, you're kind of looking at how they operate. So you're gathering as much intel, kind of TTP type information, right? What are you doing typically? And I don't want to say it's a danger. I mean, you don't ever want to look at anybody as not human, but you have to humanize them and kind of get closer to them to pull that. I mean, any good intel person's going to do that anyway, right? You get as close to them as possible. But then you start going, wow, this is a regular guy or girl out here that's doing this stuff, and they just happen to have kind of a bend in their morals that allows them to do.
So what's interesting is I know that we say that they're kind of on the other side of the moral spectrum, but I think in truth, a lot of these countries that they're coming out of, they're impoverished countries. Yeah. And I would expect, with the way that we've seen ransomware really operating as a business structure, there's probably a management tier which is getting the bulk of the payout for those actual ransomware. And a lot of those guys that you're communicating with, and tell me if this is the sense that you get as well, Zach, but I would imagine that a lot of those guys are working a 9-to-5 and just trying to pay their family expenses and get by.
Well, and I'm going to throw out some spoilers here for nobody that's seen it, but there's a particular season of Fargo that has Chris Rock in it. And he goes through the season as, kind of he's out on the field, if you will, making things happen. And he keeps talking about how he just wants to be a leader in the Kansas City mob. And so he goes through this whole process of really trying to excel, trying to get through just so that he can come up and be this higher end leader at the Kansas City mob, because he, thinks back to those like 1950s mentality of, walking down the street and people recognizing you and being in awe of this person, right? And so at the end of the season, spoiler alert for those, that haven't seen it, he gets to the level he, that he wanted to obtain. And so he reports to basically this office building one day and gets checked in, and they take him to his corner cubicle, if you will, and be like, here's your small office. And he suddenly has that realization that it's just a standard corporation with all the bureaucracy of that corporation that the mob is running as. Same thing a lot of times is these attackers, especially as when we start thinking of these ransomware as a service providers. It's a framework that's sitting out there that's pretty low price for entry, great return on investment. But then it's kind of like any other standard business model. You start buying add-ons and modules to make you be able to perform at a higher level. So maybe you pay for a module that gives you newer access to CVEs for Microsoft Office documents. You pay another extra fee for somebody that's really good with local dialect or local language for the area you want to attack. You got to pay extra for companies that can cash out your cryptocurrency. So that way, you can get it back out into fiat for wherever you live. So all these things come into play. And so what you realize, and as we've seen after we've made payment, is you make this large payment, and then you're exactly right. Here's 20% here, there's 5-10% here. And there's all these little deductions until you get down to, how much that threat actor makes at the end, which, don't get me wrong, it's still usually incredible ROI, but they're operating in countries where this is seen as a normal business almost. This is not seen as, this person having to hide away and worried constantly about, the FBI breaking down their door. So it is kind of interesting to view it from that perspective of just operating a normal business.
Ransomware is a service, right?
That's exactly what it is. I mean, a viable bit, and this is not, I mean, it's ransomware, but we've seen these types of things out of the phone scammers and everything else. I mean, you can go watch all of the fun videos on YouTube where they track them down into wherever their office is in India or wherever and get on their computers and stuff. I think we're starting to see now some activity of governments starting to go after them, realizing that this is causing a lot of problems. If you watch a risky business or listen to risky business podcasts, they always talk about, Patrick Gray always talks about releasing the hounds. That's, you're starting to see that happen. So this model is a viable business. Exactly, Zach, that are in countries that they really go, that's okay. And then, hey, if you're causing havoc in the US, maybe we're okay with that too. So just keep doing it. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it's interesting to see. I mean, these guys aren't, they're paying taxes on the ransoms that they're collecting. They're literally filing, multiple people that have been, either arrested or discovered at this point. They've pulled up their tax returns and seen that they're literally claiming the income that they're making because they see it as just a normal business.
And countries are just, they're not going to turn the taxes down because it's probably some pretty good taxes.
Yeah.
Zach, unfortunately, we're getting close to the end of this. Love to have you back on and talk about this sometime. If you're willing, maybe go into some anecdotal stories that you can tell us without, giving away everything. But I think it would be a lot of fun to dig even deeper on this sometime.
Yes.
So if you're cool with that, we'll invite you back sometime.
Sure. Absolutely, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. I do appreciate it. And just thanks for what you've done in the community. For y'all to know, Zach, like I said, he's been around a long time. I've known Zach for a while. Zach was a pilot. Zach has done crazy drone stuff at conferences I've seen him do. He's here in the, is it okay if I say where you are?
Sure.
He's in the Houston area. I'll just say that.
You're not going to give the address?
Yeah. So 123. No. Hopefully that's not anywhere close. Zach. No. So no, seriously, thanks for being on. This is great stuff. We'll invite you back sometime. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, guys. Anytime.
All right, Hutch, you got any?
As always, thank you to our listeners or viewers. Zach, was great having you on. I think this was really interesting because it gives us kind of that perspective of behind the curtain that a lot of us even in the information security industry don't get to see. So definitely appreciate having you on. And Michael, was a pleasure as always.
Always, Hutch, always. And by the way, Zach, your talk, I think at HUSECCon was recorded, should have been recorded. So once we get all of that ready to go, we'll be distributing that and everybody should be able to go see what Zach had to talk about.
Yeah. So funny story. Zach's talk, I really wanted to see it at HUSECCon, was at the exact same time as my talk was. So I'm looking forward to seeing that recording as well.
Yeah. We didn't do that on purpose. I promise. Okay. All right, everybody. Well, thank you again for joining us on episode 36. Listen to this again on the podcast and we will see you on episode 37, hopefully in a couple of weeks. Talk to you next time.